Lesson 43 today is all about multiplying and dividing mixed numbers. Now, our first problem that we have here is to multiply, and we have 4 1/3 times 6/5. We can see that we have a mixed number being multiplied by an improper fraction. What we always have to do in these problems is to turn our mixed numbers into improper fractions. Okay, let's write that out. Turn mixed numbers, you can use the symbol for numbers, mixed numbers, into improper fractions. Whenever you do a problem where you multiply or divide mixed numbers, if you follow this pattern, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to solve. And that's the way we're going to do it when we're working through these problems today. So, if we have 4 1/3, well, 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So we get 13 over 3 times 6 over 5. Now with this, we can look to see if we can simplify before we multiply. 13 never goes into 3. This cannot be reduced. 13 never goes into 5. 5 never goes into 13, so that cannot be reduced. And then finally, well, does 3 go into 6? Yes, 3 goes into 6 2 times. So instead of having 6 over 3, we're going to have 2 over 1. That makes our multiplication a lot easier, because we're now going to have 13 times 2, which is 26, and 1 times 5, which is 5. So we get an answer. We've got an answer of 26 over 5, and that's exactly how we're going to leave it. You do not need to change it back to a mixed number. You don't need to change it to a decimal. Leave it as an improper fraction. We've got an improper fraction to start with, so it's just fine to end with it. And we're all done with our first problem. Our next problem, we're going to multiply 2 1/4 times 3 1/3 times 5 1/12. Again, let's go ahead and change all these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 2 1/4 is the same as 9/4. 3 1/3 is the same as 10/3. And 5 1/12, well, 5 times 12 is 60, plus 1 more gives us 61 over 12. And now we can go ahead and find our answer. If you know what 9 times 10 times 61 is off the top of your head, that's fantastic. Write it down. You know 4 times 3 times 12? Write it down. But if you don't, that's okay, because we can simplify before we multiply. We know 3 goes into 9 3 times, so instead of writing 9 over 3, we're going to write 1 as our new denominator and 3 as our new numerator. You know that 4 and 10 are both even numbers, so we can simplify them. We're going to get a 2 and we're going to get a 5. We're cutting them both in half. Now, 61 and 12. If we look at the 61 and 12, well, those aren't going to be able to be simplified because we've got one odd and one even. 6 plus 1 is 7, and 7 is not divisible by 3. Okay, so we can't simplify that. But if we look across one more time, we can see we have a 3 and a 12. And 3 will go into 12, so we can simplify again. Instead of having 3/12, we know 3 goes into 12 4 times, we're going to get 1, and I'm going to circle it so we know that we're done simplifying this part, 1/4. Now we have a problem that looks a little bit easier to solve, especially with our denominator. Our denominator now is going to be 2 times 1 times 4, which must be 8. Then our numerator is going to be 1 times 5 times 61. Let's see what that equals. 61 times 5. Well, we know 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 6 is 30. So we get 305. We get an answer of 305 over 8. We've got our final answer. We know we can't simplify it because we couldn't simplify anything else that we were working with within our original problem. 305 over 8 is a fantastic way to report your answer. Even though we started with mixed numbers, we are fine to report our answer as an improper fraction. This is how the textbook describes them in the back as well if you check the answers to the odds. So we'll leave it like this. We don't need to do any more steps. Let's move on to the next problem. Now we've got some division. 2 1/8 divided by 3 2/3. So when we did multiplication problems, we changed everything to an improper fraction. We're going to do the exact same thing here. So we've got 17 over 8 divided by, and I always like to make the main division bar here a little bit bigger so I can keep my fractions separated. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 more is 11, so we get 11 thirds. We've got 17 eighths divided by 11 thirds, and this problem looks really complicated. In fact, when we have a fraction divided by a fraction, we've got something called a complex fraction. Now what we can do with this complex fraction to make it look a lot more simple is to say 17 eighths divided by 11 thirds. And when we write it out horizontally, it's a lot easier to look at and a lot easier to solve. Because we know when we have division by fractions, we're going to copy dot flip. So 17 eighths, copy, dot, flip, 3 elevenths. We could think about simplifying before we multiply, but 11, well, that can't go into 17, and 3, that can't go into 8. So we've got an answer that we've got to come up with. Well, we know 8 times 11 straight off the bat is 88, and 17 times 3, well, 17 times 3, if you wanted to work it out, we could work it out on the side. 3 times 7 is 21. We're going to carry that 2. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 more is 5. We've got 51. We get an answer of 51/88ths. And we're all done. We know it can't be simplified because none of our factors in our original fractions could be simplified. None of the pieces of our original fraction could be simplified. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We've got one more problem today. 4 1/8 divided by 2 1/5 times 3 1/4 divided by 5 1/2. We know when there's both division and multiplication in the same problem, they're equal in order of importance since they're opposites. We're going to work from left to right. So we'll start with the division first, then we'll do multiplication, then we'll finish up with division. First thing to do is change everything into an improper fraction. So we're going to get 33 eighths. We're going to divide that by 11 fifths. We're going to multiply that by, we've got 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 more is 13. We've got 13 fourths. And we're going to divide that by 5 1/2, which is the same thing as 11 halves. Now in this problem, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start from the left and we're going to go to the right, but we know that we can copy dot flip whenever we have division of fractions. So let's do that. 33 eighths, and we're going to multiply by 5 elevenths. Then we're multiplying, I'm changing the symbol, to 13 fourths. And then finally, if we look at the other one, we're going to multiply by 2 elevenths. So division of fractions is really just multiplication of the reciprocal. So now we're multiplying all the way across. We can simplify before we multiply in order to help us solve. What we know lots. And the first thing we know is that 11 goes into 33 3 times. So we're going to get a 1 and we're going to get a 3. That's a good one to start with. You could have used this 11 as well. It makes no difference. As we look across, we can see there's a 2 and a 4. We know 2 fourths is the same thing as 1/2. We've got to look some more. Well, 11 can't go into 13, and 5 can't go into 11, and 3 can't go into 11. If we look across some more, 5 can't go into 8, 2 can't go into 5. If we look down at the 2 can't go into the 3. So we've done as much as we can. We're going to have to say 3 times 5 times 13. We know 3 times 5 is 15, and then we can multiply 15 times 13 to help us figure out what we're going to get. 3 times 5 is 15. We're going to carry that 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 more is 4. We've got our 0 placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. We're going to get a grand total of 195. So there's our numerator, 195. Our denominator, 8 times 1, which is 8. Okay, 8 times 2 is 16. And we're going to get 16 times 11. Let's go ahead and perform that operation. 16 times 11. Maybe you remember the trick by 11s. If you do, say the answer now. If you don't, that's okay. Remember we have 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. 0 placeholder. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. We've got that answer, 176. So the answer is going to be 195 over 176. leave your answer as an improper fraction. You do not need to change it to a mixed number. Now that trick for 11s, remember if we have 16 times 11, what we're going to do is we're going to say 1 plus the 6 for the number in the middle. And our numbers on the end are going to be our 1 and our 6. So 1 plus 6 is 7, so we get 176. That was the shortcut that we've talked about. If you haven't heard that before, it's a pretty neat one to know, and it will work all the time when we multiply a number by 11. We can practice that one some more in class. A lesson practice is on page 143. That's where we'll start with our next class. Make sure you've got your notes completed, and I'll talk to you soon.